All right. Thanks for coming down, John. I know it's been a long time since we last spoke. Since we saw you in Sydney, I don't know, like 6 years. Last time we did an interview was like 9 years ago, when you were pretty much you weren't new in the industry, but you were just coming up. And I know you said that was a really old interview that you did. But yeah, what have you been up to recently? I know you've been doing a lot of affiliate stuff. You've been talking a lot about Google SGE. What have you been up to?
Dude, yeah, it's been it's funny thinking back. I feel like in the S industry, like 5 years ago, it just feels like it can be like a couple decades. But yeah, so my background, I guess, just for context, I started strictly doing link building services. I mean, that was my first way to win bread for the table, and I did that for a number of years. And I think when we last spoke, I was very much just doing services, just doing consulting around that. But I'd say about 6 years ago is when I started like the pivot towards really owning and doing work for like our own assets. And so just because we've done work in so many different spaces within SEO, got to really have one of the best possible experiences when it comes to the number of business opportunities, of verticals, of gaps in markets in terms of products and services across the web, that comes with being a marketing agency or consultant. And so through all that time, just taking notes over the years, and just finding these little nooks and crannies that we come across that, like, nobody had really done before. And so we transitioned to launching some sites. I mean, by no means was it a resounding success. I think we launched probably 15 sites in total over the course of a couple of years. Some that were just a couple page sites, some where there were massive projects. And the good news is that we did do 15 because eventually three or four of them did work out great. And so basically through that process, I'd say 2018 we had that first moment of real validation, to where we had built an asset, we were generating revenue through, it was all through like affiliate and lead gen. And I'll sort of explain why, like, we picked the sites that we did and the opportunities that we did, in a sec. But basically, yeah, we hit that like inflection point 3 or 4 years after we started this, probably in 2020, where it was like, okay, half the work we're doing is for our clients and half the work we're doing is for like our own sites, just sort of using the same team to do a lot of the same work. And for the first time, becoming more of a holistic SEO and doing a lot more than just link building or even SEO, but really like, what it takes to build a business, even though we were still keeping it simple in terms of revenue. So that was an inflection point, again, like probably 2020ish. And I'd say we stopped really taking on new clients at about 2021. And at this point, the majority of the work that I do professionally is working on sites that we own and operate. We do have a few legacy clients, people that we've worked with for a while, and just very enjoyed that experience with those teams. But we really don't take on new work at this point. I've done some one-off consulting gigs over the last few years for very particular things, but pretty much out of the services game, into owning and operating a portfolio of sites. And I guess that to round out sort of the full journey, over the last, I'd say, 9 months, I've started to look at sort of, I guess, what comes next, sort of preparing for exits of these sites. By no means in no rush. We built some pretty incredible sites in a few different verticals, but just given where I think like the AI side of things is going, where SGE, something that I'm sure we'll talk about, is going. I think there are plenty of opportunities ahead for everybody, but I think that for a lot of people that run content sites, that build that build big audiences from content, from organic search traffic, I think if they really want to survive over the next 24 months, they are going to have to make some pivots. And I think we get to make those pivots. And I think that, there's not a complete outside scenario where we don't just lean in. But I think I've reached a good point with the sites to where I think I can try to find a good home for them and someone who's really willing to kind of make those pivots, and then sort of take a breath before I think about sort of future entrepreneurial endeavors. So kind of in a transition period. So it's actually great timing that we talked. I'm really glad you reached out to me because this is a point of reflection that I'm in, and I'm happy to share things that I've learned and experiences that I had that might be helpful for other people.
So you want to sell the sites and essentially move into like a different industry or something like that, or you're still going to be in like owning digital assets and growing websites or trying to optimize for what's coming with AI and things like that? Like, are you going to try to start new websites and work out different things that you can start to display in like AI results, or what are you going to do? Are you going to, it sounds like you're going to take a break and just see what happens, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. There's a podcast called the All In Podcast. It's pretty popular, and I think there's a pretty wise takeaway from one of the speakers. I forgot which one on the podcast, but he basically talked about, I think we can all see how the world's going to like that the world's about to change. I think a lot of people agree that the world's about to change in some pretty significant ways with what we've seen in just the last 12 months alone on the artificial intelligence side, which by the way is like, we are a part of it in terms of how it's changing search and content online, but there are so many other aspects that are about to change. And they basically talked about the fact that even though we can all agree things are about to change and there's gonna be money to be made, there's gonna be opportunities, it's so early at this point to really know how the chips will fall that it might be wiser to sit on the sidelines until it's clear exactly how this animal is going to manifest itself and what direction it's going to head into. And so, at least in the AI stuff, I'm trying to stay in as involved in as possible. And the reason why I wrote my first blog post the first time in 6 years was because just honestly on a personal level, it was something like what link building was to me at one point, which was just like I was so interested in it that like I was doing that just out of my own interest. And I know there were business repercussions with the things that I was learning about, but I just got really into just like fascinated by what's going on right now. And so as much as I'm staying on top of it and trying to understand where it's going, and I think it's helpful for me to know where it's going and everybody else, I just got super into it that I wanted to kind of share my thoughts and my thoughts and predictions with sort of where things go. But for the most part, yeah, I'm kind of looking for a chance to take a breath. I've been doing this for 12 years now, and I don't know about you, James, but like there are plenty of aspects of the work that we do that I find really mentally fun, and I like the puzzles and I like the challenge. But staring exclusively at computers all day and the work being about trying to get websites to rank in Google, there's a ton of value. The world doesn't realize how much the search results provided influences so many aspects of society and the world. And I know we work in the financial side of it, and it's really cool, but I think I'm also just ready to kind of take a pause. Maybe in a couple years I'm building out another media site online, and maybe that's where I want to go. But I'm looking for opportunities to kind of take a chance to reflect, and look for other endeavors that might sort of be interesting for more than the ways that SEO has been to date for me. So
Yeah, 100%. I've been in the SEO agency business for 15 years. So yeah, I've seen it all, and I agree. Sometimes, yeah, it can be mentally challenging, but it can be mentally rewarding too. When you get results, it's like,
yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. But what do you think these Google AI changes, Google SGE, how do you think that's going to affect like digital PR? Because, in the link building world at the moment, everyone's talking about digital PR. Every time I go onto LinkedIn, I see someone sharing a digital PR case study. I mean, they share the good ones. They don't always share the bad ones. But like, what do you think is going to happen? Well, yeah, like you don't want to share like 100 referring domain campaign. Like you want to share one of those. You don't want to share one that fizzled out and got 0 links. But what do you think is going to affect digital PR with like these AI results? Do you think that's going to become more important with like news results getting pulled in? And like, I think just what I feel is I think link building and authority of sites is going to be like a benchmark. And this is just my general opinion. You know, I think links are going to become more valuable. You know, content I feel could be less valuable because every man his dog is going to be pushing out AI content. You know, like I feel like links, high quality links and authority could be a benchmark. You know, I mean, I've seen people speculating about that, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's funny because like contextually, like for my whole career, like I have been the link building guy to some people, and that's very much been the thing that I do. And so, you know, I'm sure you've been in presentations or in conversations where the person who does that thing are going to always be like, "Oh, what I do is so important. The thing is so important." The guy
Hmm.
who washes cars is going to talk about how important it is to have a washed car more than somebody else. And so I think the funny thing is over time I've always told people, they're like, how important are links? And I'm like, they're less important than they were a year ago. And a year ago they were less important than the year before. That's always been what I've told people for a decade until 12 months. And I've been scared to say it because I don't want to be like, okay, the guy who does link building services, like the guy who's an expert on this is going to say it's now more important than ever. But truly, if you think about the dynamics that are changing as Google, um, there is a clear before and after point of the web that is going to influence some major changes strategically for Google and how they approach indexing and how they approach ranking. And that is because content can now be created at infinitum. And the thing is, there are people that say that there are tools out there that can detect content written by AI services like ChatGPT, which was 100% true a couple years ago. It was partially true last year. It is not true at all anymore. There have been numerous stories where professors have tried to use tools and they flunked every student because the tools say it's ChatGPT written. All of these tools out there are now so terrible because ChatGPT and these others have gotten so good. And that's a really critical thing to understand because everything that Google has put out and what they want to do is just to say, hey, AI written content is the same type of low quality content that we've considered in the past. It's basically advanced spun content. They don't want to count it. The thing is, they, if not already, now at least like 12 months, 24 months of the year, they're not going to be able to detect the majority of AI written content online other than those that are doing it very stupidly. So for example, if you use the latest ChatGPT 4, something else to write content, you give it lots of specific directives in terms of the voice, the tone. You even spin in every once in a while some mistakes, a spelling mistake or two. You can easily devise, some black hat can easily devise a system to say, here's how I can produce content that looks as human as everything else. And so that has huge implications for SEO as a whole. And so here's the first implication. Because content like this that's becoming increasingly harder, nearly impossible to detect, the web is being flooded with all this content, and Google is changing their approach. Google has always said they want to index every page on the internet. They no longer say that. They want to just index, like, I don't know what the term they use, extraordinary content that is worth serving in results. So they've given up on the idea of indexing every single page online because the amount of content that is going to, if it already hasn't been multiplied on the web of just AI generated spam, it's only become magnitudes more. As a result, there is a couple indications of that. One of it is the fact that content expertise generally is going to be harder to use as a metric. There are still plenty of sites online to where they win right now in SEO and will continue to win because of the expertise of their content, that I think algorithmically they can determine to a large extent. But I think what they're going to increasingly have trouble with is the fact that because so much content that can be created at scale, content as a signal is becoming a much noisier one. And the result is that all of the other signals in the pie become more important because that signal is shrinking. That's shrinking, or at least it's becoming less reliable. And so one of the biggest slices of the rest of the pie for SEO is links. So I think if you looked at a trend line, links always just had this declining value because Google increasingly found new signals. So everything was diluted. It was not that anything else was like not a good signal before or afterwards than it was before. It's just everything got diluted. But now I think if you looked at the graph, links are now starting to trend up as more important because that is still a very reliable. There's only so many good high quality sites on the internet, and that is a much more scarcer resource. And what Google needs to determine authority and trust, scarcity, and content is becoming less of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. And I think like that's what we're seeing with like if you buy like expired domains, or we see like high quality editorial sites that people use for like parasite SEO and stuff like that. All of those things are starting to get more and more expensive, because more and more people are using that. It's like how Forbes ranks for all these different affiliate keywords now as well. Like Google seems to be trusting authority more. I mean, sure, there's still going to be opportunities for like small affiliates and small content sites in like lower competition spaces, but all the big spaces, I definitely feel like Google is trusting like the authority of the sites. From what I'm seeing, people seem to be investing more and more in that. And I think that's one of the only things that I think it's going to be really hard for AI to kind of dominate the link building market, because that's like, I mean, that's like something so niche that like you can't really fake the authority of a site. If you're getting hundreds of high quality links to a site, it's hard to fake that stuff, unless you're like a major media brand that owns heaps of sites, and you can just link between your own properties. But for the average business, I feel like links are probably going to become more important, and I feel like, especially with one thing that we've been doing just for some clients is like going to like the Google SGE results and seeing what is showing up, what kind of listings they're pulling in, and then trying to get onto those lists and things like that. Like even though like what you see now may never get released, but we're trying to do stuff like that for clients, or for our, like, because we run our own sites too, and like thinking about stuff like that for our own sites, like what is Google pulling in? What do they deem to be authority for this? Like, what do they deem to be a trusted source? That's one thing that we're playing around with, but it's going to be interesting times,
Dude, it's going to be, I legitimately think that the changes that are coming with these developments in AI and what, how Google's responded with SGE, to me, I can't think of a single moment in the history of being SEO where I feel like more change is currently and about to happen at any point since I've been in this in 2010. So I just think, to be honest, the big reason I just wanted to talk publicly about on a blog post that I put out is just trying to make sure people realize like this is as big of a shift. We've had so many years where like not much happens. Our site should be fast. There's more schema out there. Okay, cool. Like there's really not like create great content, get links. What it was, maybe in 2017 between 2018, the differences in SEO might have been pretty small. But I think like between 2023, the beginning of 2023, and like let's say the end of 2024, I think it's going to be a very interesting before and after picture with how things are about to really change.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's going to be interesting times ahead. I guess you just got to plan for it and try to do what you can to show up. But I mean, the good thing is, this is just my opinion for Google, is for like YMYL, like it's not really showing for a lot of that stuff, but who knows what's going to happen. I think the reason that Google isn't showing it for those kind of queries is probably that's where they make a lot of money. I know they say it's like for the user, but if you think about it, like in insurance, credit cards, life insurance, all that type of stuff, like that's where they make really high CPCs. So it makes sense not to show it in that. But the long tail informational stuff, less money is to be made. So of course it's going to be, if you've got a site and it's like an
Totally.
informational type site, you're going to be in trouble. You're going to be losing a lot of traffic. So yeah, it might be time to diversify. But I mean, changing it up a bit. Like, I know you're a big resource link building guy, and like, what are your thoughts on like resource link building? I know a lot of people, I mean, like stuff like digital PR is like really big now, but I think still the age old resource link campaigns to content pages and things like that, that's still like a very good strategy. I mean, are you still doing those kind of strategies on your own web assets that you own? I know you said you've retained the team that you've worked with over the years. Are you still doing those big asset campaigns, and like what's working well in that space?
Yeah, that was sort of what my agency got built on. Like early on, I realized that talking to the best in the game at link building, and I'm sure what I'm about to say is very much you fit in that category too, which is the fact that like there's so many ways to get a link on the web, and like if you are a site owner, like you just got to figure out like what are the ways to get links that fit like your resources, your industry, and all that stuff. But as an agency, like you can't be that flexible and scale. What you have to do is you really got to pick a few tactics, things that scale well, that can reach as many different verticals as possible, be applicable in as many different verticals as possible, and then really get good at those. I've never met a single link building agency that is great at getting links in 10 very distinctly different ways, maybe even 8. 6 is probably a stretch. Basically, everybody I've met that I respect the shit out of in this industry do one specific type of campaign that they just got really good at. And so for me, that was resource pages early on. I noticed that like, okay, pitching somebody to add a link to a page that already exists and is meant to be kept up to date, that pitch is very different than a pitch to, let's say, a blogger to write to write about something in an entirely new blog post. That's an entirely different pitch to a journalist who's looking for some piece of news, something that's new out there. It's a very different pitch to organizational websites that do vetting for members, and they feature their members for any kind of local link building. Overall, like, as cool as it is that you can get a bunch of links in a bunch of different ways, to scale as an agency, you gotta have to pick a lane or two. And so our lane was resource based link building. We don't do nearly as much as we did in our heyday by any means. We still do a little bit. Basically, what I saw was a trending slight decline in success rates since 2013, when I really started to scale up the agency. And I would say by 2019 was sort of the last year. It was a good chunk of what we were doing. And that was just because we were doing the same amount of work and getting less results. And we could sort of offset it with prices to an extent, but it really was, it was kind of whatever. So, and I'll tell you exactly what we did. And I'd love to share some of the different war stories that we have from doing resource-based link building. So let's see, at one point in time, and I think there's something you can learn from, even though this is an internal tool that we built. At one point in time, we had this whole back-end system to where, let's say we had a campaign to where we had like a guide for let's say a printer company about like recycling like ink cartridges. Okay, we brought out this huge guide on recycling ink cartridges, getting links to like an office supply store, and we noticed that, hey, look, that fits perfectly into, there's a bunch of different resource pages online about environmental resources, ways you can go green at home. Lots of opportunities there. And I can also talk about how we sort of would pick topics and opportunities. But let's say we found a couple thousand environmental or going green resource pages that were super great fits. We'd reach out. We would see if we can get a link. And, because it's purely organic stuff, I mean, if we're doing really well, you might get links from like 3 or 4% of them. Realistically, it was closer to like 1%. So for those who haven't done bigger campaigns, I mean, There's sometimes you're reaching out to sites that there's just no one there. Sometimes you're reaching out to sites that just are overwhelmed with there's lots of stuff that's outdated. Maybe reach out to organizations where the person at the front desk that would delegate this is got way more important tasks. So it's pretty low success rate. But one thing we found that was like really sneakily good was we would, when we saved a prospect, a resource page in BuzzStream, the software that we still use to this day, just a CRM software, just like Salesforce, but for link building. We would log a resource page. The API would then pull things into a custom dashboard for us. And what we would do is every single day, once a resource page got saved, we would go and check the page to see if it's exactly as it was the day before. So page were ever to be updated at any point in the future, we would get pinged. And the reason that's important is because with any type of activity, PR, link building, anything, usually people find things because like, oh, a competitor was at it, or like, oh, they wrote a similar blog post like that in the past, or they've covered this news story. Well, guess what? Some of those people might have been doing it at times when they were very actively publishing or they're actively, curating something. If you can catch them,
So you're
right
looking at like
moment,
when the pages are getting updated, you're basically looking for when websites are actively updating the content that they're changing that maybe on a weekly basis. That is a better checkpoint versus like someone who doesn't update it in years, you know?
Well, yeah. Okay, it's both. It's the guy who hasn't updated in years, but then randomly updated it because maybe he got some little bout of inspiration. But if you catch them right after they updated it, he is multiples more likely. So when we would reach out within a few days of a page being updated, our success rates went up about 5 to 10x.
Okay, that's a good one.
So that was something that we figured out and we scaled. We had this whole system. Eventually we got so crazy with it, and we just never maintained a software because scraping pages and being able to identify accurately when changes happens, that was an endeavor. One other cool thing we pulled out of that was because we were scanning all these resource pages all the time and we would know when it was updated, we also had a dashboard that would show us within a campaign which links were being added most often to any of these resource pages, because that would allow us to find which competitors are actively building resource page links. So we would know both these guys are doing SEO right now, so it's good to look at what they're doing. Also, we can just ride their coattails. Every time they got a link from a page, we can then reach out and get a link as well. And so it was a really easy way. It was like following an ambulance driving down the road and following them through traffic. Like basically what we were doing. Even though this is way more legal than that is. But yeah, so we've done all kinds of random stuff with the resource page links. We don't do as much anymore just because I just feel like all those site owners and people involved are really jaded at this point from all those pitches. I think predominantly SEOs have been quantity over quality for outreach. And I think it's kind of ruined it for everybody else in so many ways. And so that's just one campaign type where we're a lot more selective about it. We do it when the pitch is like freaking amazing and not just like a generic guide that can be added. Even though that still totally works, it's just a volume game. And I never wanted to build a volume shop.
Yeah, that's the problem. Even with things like statistic assets and stuff like that, you know, I remember like 10 years ago, you make like a statistic post and you do research and put it together, and then you reached out and like you'd have a really good reply ratio. You could like 5%, 3%, you'd be getting heaps of links. But now every man his dog is doing statistics posts, you know, and even like the worst thing you can do is add a couple of statistics posts to like your agency site. We get absolutely smashed every day. We get people just like add my link. This one statistic isn't updated, and it's just like you kind of feel on the side of the webmaster, you know, like these guys are getting absolutely smashed. You know, and I mean, it's good to see people's pitches because like 95% of pitches suck, but then sometimes you get like something different. And then that's what I like about owning a lot of websites as well, because you get the email pitches, you know, and you get to go through and you see all the bad pitches, and then one decent one comes through and you're like, oh, this is actually pretty good, you know. And that's something like a point about resource pages. And this is something that, I remember I was at MozCon and I was talking to Russ Jones, who passed away a couple of years ago, he said to me one of the best tactics he ever did for resource pages was where he said he had this tool called Tenon.io, and then he said he reached out to government and education sites, and he basically found links that were not accessible to like visually impaired users, and he said that was a killer strategy to get really good conversions. You know, yeah, and it's
Yo,
just
of
like stuff like
course,
that is
dude.
like such
Because
like
those people care about that. It's the
yeah. He
law. They're
said
like, that's their
that was like
responsibility to do that.
yeah, he said that was like his number one like go-to strategy to kind of get into like government and edu sites. And then like something as basic as that, like it's a decent tip, you know, because you tell them like, hey, this competitor, their link isn't accessible, but like our page is, you know, and there was a tool to actually do that. So that was like his little hook. And he went through like all the
Love
different
that.
strategies. Like he went through like 20 different strategies. And he said out of the 20, this was like the number one that they got a lot of success from. So stuff like that, you know, you see like just one little hook, you know, and it can work, and then you can like scale it out using that same thing. But it's essentially what you did with the looking at pages that haven't been updated, you know. And I was wondering if there was something you could do with like Wayback Archive and look at pages or something. I don't know. It's tricky.
Well, we would seed our initial database with archive.org versions. So we would, yeah, we would pull in the last version of Wayback. Problem is, Wayback doesn't index pages every day. It takes a really popular page for them to come even close to that, and so they just don't do it nearly consistently enough for it to be useful. So we had to we built our own Wayback machine basically internally. So yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, you know, like just one little tactic and then you can scale it out, you know. And like, I mean, do you still think like today's market? I think like this is just what I think, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. But I still think resource links are still very valuable. You know, like I feel like it's not something, maybe it's not as sexy as like a digital PR campaign. That's why you don't see people talking about it as lot like as the same degree on like LinkedIn and whatnot. But like, what are your thoughts? Do you feel like it still drives a lot of results, but it sounds like you think that the success of these type of campaigns is lower than what it used to be? You know, what's your thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
So I think the value is still there. I don't think the value has ever changed. I think if anything, maybe the value is slightly increased because these sites have been hit up so much that like those pages, they're just a lot less likely to do stuff. There's a lot less crap these days on those pages. I would say the campaign, I'll talk about the campaigns that we still do in order to kind of better frame is like, you just have to have a pitch that is more than just a link on a page. It's gotta tie into something much more meaningful. Because if you think about every person you're reaching out to these, they don't care. They don't care. Like the few people that do like add these links might be just doing it because they feel like it's their job, and they're obligated. Like if you hit up an administrative assistant or yeah, like a university department that's in charge of website updates, the first 2 months they're working there, guess what? He or she is going to do it because that's part of their job. 2 years in, they're sick of it. They realize it doesn't really matter. They're going to stop doing it. But the pitches that we hone in on is we do a lot of work with nonprofits in terms of being target groups, and we do that for a couple of reasons. First one, to build off what I just said, nonprofits, they have a mission, they have a goal that they are trying to fulfill. It's this hard to pinpoint goal to end homelessness or to make sure every kid is literate or to save every dog off the street. Like they're pretty big goals, but that's their mission. And so when you reach out to a business, when you reach out to a personal blogger trying to make money, the only conversation you can have with them that's going to really influence them is a financial one. It's one that's something that I can pitch to you that's going to grow your audience or make you more money. When you talk to nonprofits, you can make appeals like, if this can save one dog from being for being adopted that doesn't get euthanized, if this allows 5 more kids books at home to read. If the thing that you're doing is going to make some kind of impact on their mission, it's so freaking hard to say no to that when you are a nonprofit. They just have they're there for a higher reason, and you can make appeals to those higher reasons. I'm not saying you're supposed to manipulate them. I'm just saying they do things for like good reasons, and if you can build pitches that fit within those reasons, you have a way better pitch than a link on the page. It's about helping their mission. So to give you an example of something, let's say, would be a perfect example of this. We'll say,
Like
we did a
say
campaign.
for example, this is something that I just thought of. Sorry to go off track, but like, what if you're outreach into like, say like a doggy rescue thing, and then you say, hey, we love what you're doing. We're gonna share this on like social media, you know, and like we're gonna bring more awareness to your cause. Have you tested stuff like that? Sorry to go off track there a little bit.
You could totally do the quid pro quo thing. I think that, but that's universal. I think everything about, let's say we're reaching out to a business is going to be a quid pro quo. It's going to be an exchange. The thing you can do about nonprofits is truly what Google considers organic link building. Like there's no exchange of products or services. So going back to the animal example, we did a campaign way back in the day where we built this like pet resume tool, and it was basically this thing that allows people to fill out information and get some type of I guess sign off. This is a while ago. Some kind of, it was giving more information that somebody could provide to an apartment complex or a homeowner that they're renting from, that would increase the chances that they would be okay with them having a pet. Whether it was getting approval up front, or whether it was giving information about that dog that proves that it's not going to be aggressive, it's not going to be causing any issues. That was something that I think we got links from like a couple hundred animal shelters from, because we could be like, hey, one of the biggest things that prevents people from adopting dogs is the fact that they live in rental housing that doesn't allow dogs. And this tool, this resource that we created, helps people convince their landlords or their apartment complex to make an exception. That was such a powerful message, and it had nothing to do with a link on the page. It had everything to do with their values and their mission. And again, that's why we built 200 links really easy. We built so many links for that we actually had to stop, because it was so we did it for a housing website, but it was like skewing the whole link graph of our website to like animals and pets and stuff. And I was like, no, we can't have more than half of the links to our entire site to this like pet resume tool. But overall, hopefully that's a good enough example off the top of my head of something.
Yeah, I like, so essentially you're using emotion in your outreach. So essentially like that is the hook, is like using the emotion to these non-for-profit websites and basically saying like, we've got this content asset or tool and it's going to essentially help their audience, and like it's going to help achieve their cause. Like you're going to expedite it type thing. So yeah.
And also like I wouldn't say it really comes down to this, but I mean, every nonprofit, like they do paperwork, they get certain status, and they're obligated to fulfill their mission on paper. So again, if you can put a pitch that's super simple for them in terms of what they can do with it, which is just adding a link on a page, is very simple. And if you really speak to that mission, they're kind of going against their own the objective of their legal entity, which is something that most organizations do everything they can to make sure that it's clear that they are fulfilling that mission. So again, there's different types of prospects. For example, I never reach out to small businesses unless I'm straight up offering money or like something super tangible that's going to help grow their business as an exchange. And those are not truly white hat links, because they're not doing it for purely organic reasons. The thing is, no small business gives a shit about any of the pitches that SEOs give them for these different resource page stuff. And also, they have somebody else as like an outside company that manages the website that they pay hourly. It might cost them $100 to tell their website design agency to update this page. So think about the best tip I can give from all my experience is like, truly understands like the types of websites, the people that run them, the organizations behind them, what they are trying to do, what they're not trying to do, what motivates them, and then obviously, lastly, like what are the resources and ability they have to actually do the thing you're asking them for. And for all those reasons, small businesses are the worst.
Yeah, I agree. And I think like we get like, because we mainly target mid to enterprise level companies through our agency, but even some mid-sized companies that we work with, they still like forward the emails through from like certain pitches that seem legit. And they're like, hey, should we do this? Like someone's offering something. And usually we're like, well, like this site looks sketchy. No, don't do it. So I agree with what you're saying, where there's like a gatekeeper or where there's like, people that are going to potentially put a stop to your efforts, it's going to make it a lot harder. So yeah, you're right. Like using like emotions and thinking about how you can help people. You know, it's like the other day, Canva reached out to me and they did like an outreach, and they were like, it wasn't like Canva's outreach, because I don't know if you ever got outreach from Canva years ago. It was quite good, but they must have changed some internal team or something, because this recent outreach they were doing, it was just like a guest poster style outreach, you know, like, hey, you're a digital agency, here's 4 great topics that you could do, you know, increasing foot traffic or something. And it's like, we didn't even do that. It's like, it's just like a spammy strategy that someone's thought, hey, let's just roll this out to digital agencies. And things like that, you know, like you got to have emotion, you got to give back to the person, try to give them a reason, you know, like I said before, you know, like I remember a strategy that we did years ago for a like a vacation rentals business was like, we looked where there was all where like little events were happening in towns, right? And then we looked like where's concerts in towns, like where's random events, and then we reached out to these random events and said, hey, we've got accommodation in your town. If you add a link to our page about your town, like we're gonna share it on our social media account, you know. And these little events love that, because one, you're driving in revenue,
that's a great idea.
and then 2, you're giving them a little bit back with additional promotion, you know. Like that, those type of campaigns can work well. You're right, but it's a bit more emotional, you know. Like you're helping the people, you know. They see that and they're like, holy hell, like these guys are they're gonna share it, they're gonna promote it, you know. But I mean, off the back of that, like what are some other link building secrets, I guess you could say, that you've used over the years that have worked well? I mean, you've mentioned some good ones today, like looking at pages that are getting updated and frequency of updates, and like using emotion to target certain types of verticals. But like, what else is there? I remember years ago you mentioned something about like reverse engineering Amazon pages and stuff like that. You know, what, like, is there anything else that I think it was you that said that? Someone, I can't remember. It was a long
Reverse
time
engineering,
ago.
I don't doubt it. I've had all kinds of random ideas. Not all of them, not nearly all of them have been successful, but I would say, yeah, there's a couple interesting stories I'd love to share. So one of them was this was probably 2015. It was a while ago. And I think this very much could also work today, which was, dude, we sent postcards to get links. I am proud that we have sent link building requests by electronic mail, real mail, over the phone. Maybe we need to do some Morse code or something like that to really complete the whole trio. But we did this really targeted campaign to where essentially it was for an accounting software education company. So they provide test prep material for like the CFA exam, one of the top accounting degrees you can get. And there were only so many of these resource pages on universities, or just these static pages on university sites in the accounting departments we're talking about, preparing for the exam. And they sometimes would link to my client. Like they're decently popular. They had probably links from like 80 of these like 400 that we found already. So like they had some good links, but like I wanted as many of those other 320 as possible, because they were a name that like at least of people recognized in the space. We already got a bunch of links that way. And some of these other 320 would mention them by name, but they didn't link. And so I think the reason why we did something so extreme was because they only needed like 80 more of these links to like just be done in a way, number one ranking site. No, like it's history in terms of just being the most authoritative site with the best links. So I was like, okay, these 320 prospects, what could we do to give us the best chance, even if it was way more extra work than everything else? And we came up with postcards. So we found this service that was former teachers. I don't think they're around today, but there's plenty of others like it. For like $1 postcard or $1 a letter. Sorry, it's not postcards, like letters. $1 a letter, they would handwrite a message of up to 60 words. And so we had these former teachers writing letters that said like, hey, you know, we're from here. Like, I forgot exactly what we said in the message, but it was a typical link building pitch. It was just like a little more personalized, just to make sure they knew that like we're writing this specifically to them. You know, like you've already mentioned us by name. It would be a huge help if like, you know, you could link the name to our website, just to make it easier for your students. And then we had a separate pitch for those who didn't include it and be like, hey, listen, you mentioned the other top options. Yeah, like we should be included. If I was doing this campaign today, I would think about perfectly every single word chosen, but it was a while ago, so I'm giving you the gist. And dude, we got links from 20 to 25% of the sites that we sent letters to, which is, you know, nuts to get links from 20%. I would say only do that if you have this like really good reason why they should do it, and your resources are limited in terms of you know, the number of prospects, and you really want to get links from these. But if you have a really strong pitch and you're let's say sending a letter to like a bunch of like smaller nonprofits and it costs you $1 or $2 per letter, and if you get a link from even 10% of them, that's $10 in costs to send that thing. And guess what? You are going to stick out. That jaded webmaster that like has dealt with pitch after pitch, if you've got a really good message and you send it with a handwritten letter, that is going in a category of its own to that person. So that was one cool thing we did a while ago for a very particular campaign.
Yeah, no, I've tested that years ago. I did like a USB bottle opener, and I sent it to people trying to get links, and it works. Like, but I think like you're right. Like, because if you do like a handwritten letter to like a non-for-profit, like that's going to stand out, you know, and like no one really gets many letters anymore. Like I think about our office here, like we barely get many letters, you know, and if they do, it's like a fine or it's like a bill or something like that random. But like imagine if you opened up like a letter that was handwritten and it was like, can I get a link on your site? Like you're gonna like at least reach out to the person because they've gone above and beyond, you know. And I think the fact that it was also like it was written by teachers and like the outreach was going to teachers, like people like stuff like that too, you know. So yeah, there's definitely something there with that type of strategy too, you know. I mean, the only thing that I'd worry about, like with like bigger charities, is where they've got like a receptionist or something, you know, and then they open the letter and then they're like, "What the hell is this?" You know, you gotta. I guess you gotta try to hit the right person. Did you do some did you do some analysis to find out who was the right person in the business to hit that was addressing the letter to, or?
I think we just sent it to the department within the university, and these weren't big departments. And I think you're right. If you're sending things to a big organization's general address, it's not going anywhere. But if you're sending something to an organization of like 10 people or less, it's gonna get to the person, and it's gonna turn heads. So you're right. Don't do this to Fortune 500s or massive international organizations.
Yeah, 100%. And I think like that's the thing, you know, you have to kind of profile who you want to target as well. Like if you're reaching out to Apple and you're sending them a letter, that's gonna go straight into the bin, you know. But if it goes to the right type of department with like 10 people, it's highly, highly targeted, you know. But back to a point you mentioned earlier about Anchor Text distribution and like when you did that pet resume campaign to the real estate site. Like, what's your thoughts on that? Like, when if a campaign goes really well, goes viral, you get a lot of links, it can dilute the total link profile of the site. And then like the relevance of that site can move from being about real estate to then like start
Yes.
ranking for
Yeah.
like a whole bunch of like pet related queries and things like that. And then that can sometimes throw it out a bit. And and that's a mistake I've seen people do with like when they buy a business and then they redirect it in, and they redirect it into their
Mhm.
business, but then the other businesses got dodgy links, or it's like relevance is completely to something else, and then they start ranking for all random stuff. What's your thoughts on that too?
Yeah, I think this is one of the most untalked about big potential issues that so many people do not realize that I've seen. Say I won't say time and time after again, but in some very noticeable cases. I think one example that I'll just never forget because it was the weirdest link profile I've ever seen was a law firm that had 200 total linking root domains to their site, to their homepage, and to all their other pages except for one. And then that one other page had 2,000 linking root domains. It was a scholarship. It was like an essay scholarship. Like, luckily, it was for law students, but all of their content, like all of those links, were from pages about financial aid for students. And the context of the pages of those links are big relevant signals in terms of what Google interprets. Like, what is this website that's being linked to topically about? I don't think they rank that well because I think they screwed up their link profile so much in terms of just getting too many links to a page that wasn't relevant enough to what they did. I would say, yeah, generally speaking, I've seen like a page attract links. I don't know. I've seen a bunch of examples. I guess the big takeaway is be very careful. Okay, actually, this is a great example. So a real estate site we threw up a page about like some this like data analysis about the state of like the Internet of Things industry, and this was like years ago. We got to a point where we hit 300 linking root domains to that point, and it was still just going up and up, and the whole site had 1,000 links. The more I thought about it, I'm like, yo, this real estate site, Internet of Things, we were getting links from like data security sites. And it was just like, whoa, we got to be really careful right now. So we actually 404 the page. One of the few times I've ever just straight up been like, the only solution here is just to 404 this. But I guess on more targeted campaigns or resource page stuff, it's fine to like build a bridge between your topic and some other topic you can get links on for resource pages, but have a limit. Have a limit. I would say for a typical site that has like, let's say that in cartridge recycling campaign idea for like an office supply store. If you have 200 existing links and you're doing link building for this new resource page, I would say get up to 50 for this like in cartridge recycling guide. But at that point, don't go further because you're just all Google is trying to do is interpret what your website is an authority on, and you're just diluting your relevance towards all these little topics that you use to piggyback on to get links. And so just make sure you don't put too many eggs in certain baskets. And then also just don't get links to like, don't create content that has nothing to do with your business at all just to get links, because you're just screwing yourselves actually in a way that's very different than screwing yourselves with black hat stuff. Because you're telling Google you're an expert on something else, and so you're not going to rank for the things you want to rank for. So
Yeah, I think that's a big issue that a lot of businesses make. They get like these content agencies that just make content for content's sake, and it's all not relevant, and then we'll do an audit of a business, and then you see like, oh, they've got 50 pieces of content that aren't even related to their company at all. Like I remember an insurance company that had like content about horses birthdays and all sorts of random stuff. It's like, who made this stuff? Like it's like and then that's why I think like content audits and like doing like content decay and things like that, like that's becoming more and more popular, because everyone's been doing SEO for so long now. or content agency been selling this stuff for many, many years, like those type of services is where you're cleaning up legacy work, you're doing the analysis and you're cleaning up a site, it's like SEO is becoming more like that too. It's like you're fixing up problems, from prior activity. So yeah, no, man, it's there's a lot to think about. But I mean, wrapping this up, like, I mean, do you have anything final to say to everyone that's going to be listening to this? Like, any final words of wisdom from you that you can think about?
Read about SGE. Understand that Google is going to try to eat all your lunch. Google figured out a way to serve more of your content without giving you attribution. It's featured snippets on steroids. Be aware that if you built a lot of traffic off of content that lots of other sites have published before, anything in B2C, anything that you can find dozens of articles already on that topic that you're maybe ranking number one for right now, guess what? All that information is being ingested into these AI models. And the goal for Google at this point is to, for the first time ever, they don't need the broader web. They've always needed us to serve results, but this is the first time they actually have an out to where they really don't need any of you anymore to serve information for substantially more queries where people never have to leave Google. So I would just say, please read about SGE. Please understand the pressure Google as a corporation is under. Please understand what motivates them. Please understand the context of the decisions they made in the past. Not to end on a super scary note, but it's a message that I want to like tell fellow SEOs of just like, be aware that like monumental shifts are changing in terms of how we interpret our relationship with Google, because they're acting pretty erratically in response to what ChatGPT is sort of becoming a threat as. So super fun note. That's the thing I'd like to say.
Yeah, no, it's a big one. And yeah, I agree. People have got to look into it, like you can't be asleep at the wheel, so many companies, even in Australia, they're not even aware of like SG, because like, I mean, we've got like a trial account and all that, but like a lot of people I think are a bit like asleep at the wheel, and they're like, they don't realize like what changes are coming and how it could affect their business and how they can prepare for it as well, because you can prepare for it, but like, yeah, it's going to be a decent sized change. So it's got to be at the forefront of it and thinking about all the changes. But no, I really appreciate your time today, John. And where can people reach out to you if they want to get in touch?
Shit, man. I'm on Twitter, John Cooper ATX, JON Cooper ATX, ATX as in Austin, Texas. Follow me there. Hit me up. Yeah, I love to just talk shop. I'm at a good point in my career where I just want to hang.
That's a good place to be. But anyway, John, appreciate it. Thank you.
Sweet. Thank you, man.